Welcome, everyone, to Isaiah and His Times. We'll begin today with the introduction to the book of Isaiah. Who is this man? What makes him so special? Imagine a prophet who could speak directly to kings without fear of execution. Imagine a prophet who prophesied for 90 years, 9-0, nearly a full lifetime, and whose visions were so clear that the Talmud says that he saw almost as clearly as Moses himself. This is Isaiah. He's not just another prophet, but he's really the most important of all the later prophets in the Bible. And his words were not just for his time. Many were specifically set aside, and many of his prophecies were specifically intended for our generation to understand. Now, the sages teach us that all the prophets, they looked through a dim glass, like something that was kind of dirty, where you could see through the glass, but not so clearly. Whereas Moses looked through a clear glass, right? What Moses saw was so much clearer than all the other prophets. There's no question, certainly in the Jewish tradition, that Moses is unequaled when it comes to prophecy. But after Moses, there's still a ranking, right? Not everybody is the same, right? Moses is at the very top with his crystal clear vision. But then after Moses comes Isaiah with his remarkably clear sight. And only after Isaiah do we find the rest of the prophets. So he's in this incredible number 2 ranking behind Moses in terms of the clarity and significance of his prophecies. Now, the Seder Olam Rabbah, which is a book of teachings from the sages that goes through the different generations and explains when people lived, tells us that Isaiah prophesied for about 90 years. And if we compare this to other major prophets, like Jeremiah, who prophesied for 40 years, Ezekiel, who prophesied for 22 years, and Hosea, who prophesied for 60, we see that Isaiah, who prophesied for 90, has a particularly significant window of prophecy covering several generations. It's almost difficult for us to imagine today. Most people, their working lives, by the time they start making a major impact in the world, right? What do you have, 20, 30 years to really, that's your generation to make a difference? Isaiah was doing it for 90, right? He lived to such an old age. And so this extraordinary duration of his life allowed Isaiah to address multiple generations and witness massive historical changes over the course of his lifetime. Now, the sages teach us, Rabbi Levi says, we have a tradition from our ancestors that Amoz and Amaziah, king of Judah, were brothers. Now, who is Amoz? Amoz is the father of Isaiah, as you find in the very beginning of the book. So the father of Isaiah, Amoz, was the brother of Amaziah, who was the king of Judah, which makes Isaiah the nephew of the king of Judah. Right? It means that he was a prince. He was royal. He was not just another guy who was very holy and connected to God. Right? He was born into the royal family of Judah. He was a descendant of King David himself. And so unlike other prophets who shouted from outside of the palace walls, they were the outsiders coming to poke holes in the leadership that was not fulfilling its mission and not acting the way that they should before God. Isaiah was an insider who was doing that, right? He walked without problem right into the throne room. He could talk to the king anytime he wanted, right? And if you compare that to his contemporaries, Amos was a shepherd who was kicked out of the northern kingdom of Israel. Jeremiah, who came later, right? He was imprisoned and persecuted. And Micah delivered his prophecies from the countryside. That's very different than Isaiah. Isaiah could speak truth to power, which is really one of the leading, maybe the most important role of a prophet. He could do that without fear because he was part of that powerful family. Now, the Hebrew word navi, which is the Hebrew word for prophet, literally means one who speaks forth. Right? Most prophets had to force their way in to deliver God's message, to speak forth, to give over their message. But Isaiah had natural access, and he could speak both as an insider, but also as a divine messenger from the outside. So he was, in a sense, playing these dual roles from the inside of the family, but also a messenger from God to the family of the king.
Are you enjoying this Bible class? Take your study deeper with Bible Plus. Explore over 200 courses taught by expert Israeli educators, right from the land where it happened. Get a free month trial using the code BibleStudy at checkout. The link is in the description below. Now back to your class.
Now, as I mentioned before, Isaiah prophesied over the course of many generations. And so he was the key prophet in the kingdom of Judah for 4 different kings. So let's go through historically and understand where Isaiah falls in the book of Kings. Right? The book of Kings is the historical record of what happened in that era of the first temple. And Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, are the prophecies that he shared during his lifetime, which fell during that first temple era. Now, the first king was King Uzziah. Okay, King Uzziah reigned for 52 years. He was a very long-serving king, and it was a time of incredible prosperity for the people of Judah. Right? You could read all about it in the second book of Chronicles, chapter 26. There was a big economic boom. They built new defensive towers around Jerusalem. There was agricultural development. There was a strong army. The nation was very vibrant at that time. But ultimately we find Uzziah's downfall, right? The king Uzziah, like so many others, fell prey to arrogance. Right? So we read in the second book of Chronicles, 26:16. But after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. He was unfaithful to the Lord his God and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. And a king, even one as powerful and as great as King Uzziah, has to know his place. There is in ancient Israel, a division of responsibilities among the leadership. You have kings, you have prophets, you have priests, you have the Sanhedrin, the great scholars, the judges, right? And each one has to stay in their lane. There's a separation of powers in ancient Israel, not just in the Constitution of the United States, but in ancient Israel, there was a separation of powers as well. And when you step out of your lane, trouble ensues. So what was the result? When King Uzziah started acting like a priest, right, he was struck and punished with leprosy. And then we read in Isaiah 6:1, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. So it seems that Isaiah really began to prophesy at the tail end of King Uzziah's life. That was the beginning of Isaiah's time as a prophet. Then came King Jotham, or King Yotam in Hebrew. He reigned for 16 years. And we read in the second book of Kings, 15:34, that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. Right? His father Uzziah fell prey to arrogance, but most of his life had followed God and done the right thing. So this King Jotham, he built the upper gate of the temple. He defeated the Ammonites. And during this period, Isaiah focused on warning against dangerous foreign alliances. These foreign alliances, which we usually see as a good thing, can also be very, very dangerous, particularly for the people of Israel. As it says in the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 7, you got to be very careful, avoid making any covenants together with the 7 nations that the people of Israel were supposed to destroy in the land. And it's not 100% clear there. Are the people of Israel allowed to make covenants with other nations that live in neighboring countries? Why is it so dangerous? Because it says there in the book of Deuteronomy that the influences of these other nations on the people of Israel could be very, very dangerous, right? The people of Israel were the monotheists, the believers in God, the ones who were given the Bible. At that time, way before Christianity, a long, long time before the spread of the Bible around the world, the only people who had the Bible were the people of Israel. And so foreign alliances tend not to just be military alliances. They also tend to be cultural. They have an impact upon the two nations that are working together. And so Isaiah was very concerned at that time to warn the king and to warn the people about these foreign alliances. They can be beneficial, but they have to be done correctly. And they're not always okay. Sometimes they're extremely dangerous depending upon the nation that you're forming an alliance with. If you're forming an alliance with a pagan nation with very bad values, that doesn't believe in God, and maybe they sacrifice their children, to their gods, to their idols, right? That could be, you could lose a lot more than you gain in those kinds of situations. So that was the second king that Isaiah prophesied during his time. The third is King Ahaz, who also served for 16 years. He reigned for 16 years. He dealt with the Syro-Ephraimite war, where he was attacked both by the nations in the north, the Gentile nations in the north, and also the people of Israel, the northern kingdom themselves. And he made the fatal decision to call to Assyria, the great empire of Assyria, for help against Isaiah's advice, foreign entanglements. Right? So this is in the second book of Kings, 16:3. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel. Right? This was a big problem. The kings of Israel were a lot worse than the kings of Judah. Right? You have kings of Judah who served God, but almost entirely all of the kings of Israel for the entire First Temple era, worshipped idols. They did terrible things. So now we have a king of Judah, King Ahaz, who is following and copying the ways of the kings of Israel. That's not good. And he even sacrificed his son in the fire. Right? Talk about, evil pagan practices. He sacrificed his own son, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. So the very people that God drove out, the seven nations, the pagans who slaughtered their own kids and gave them as sacrifices to their gods, we had to destroy them. The people of Israel had to come and destroy them and then replace them. Now they were doing precisely what the seven nations themselves had done, and which had earned them their own destruction. And so, this was a very dark time, a very difficult time for Isaiah and for the people of Judah and Israel as well. Then finally, the last king under which Isaiah prophesied is the greatest of them all, King Hezekiah, or in Hebrew, King Chizkiyahu. And he was really the great reformer of the people of Israel. It says in Kings 18:3, the second book of Kings, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. Now that is quite high praise, that he followed his ancestor David. Unbelievable. He instituted massive religious reforms. He restored proper temple worship. He forced the people to give up their bamot, their individual altars in their own homes, and all come to Jerusalem to unify the nation in the service of God at the temple. And he also faced one of the greatest crises in Judah's history to that point, which was the King Sennacherib's invasion of Judah, where he destroyed many cities and killed and exiled many people until ultimately surrounded Jerusalem. We thought Jerusalem was going to fall. And then, of course, God miraculously saves Jerusalem and his entire army dies overnight in an absolute miracle. So all this is during the time of Isaiah. Isaiah served as both the spiritual advisor and also a strategic counselor to King Hezekiah throughout this era. Now, those are the four kings throughout which he served, right? A lot of ups and downs in Isaiah's life. But to shift now to his literary genius, because Isaiah, everyone, was a literary genius. His Hebrew is considered among the most beautiful Hebrew in all of biblical literature. He uses very sophisticated royal imagery, court language, because he knew all of this firsthand. He was a prince. So yes, of course, the prophecies came from God, but it was Isaiah who put them into words. And the words that he chose were absolutely astounding. He used complex metaphors that work on multiple levels simultaneously. And also, this is something that we'll talk about in class 3. While most prophets, they focused primarily on Israel, Isaiah consistently addressed other nations. And most famously in Isaiah 2, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths." Right? This prophecy, which is, I think, the number one most quoted prophecy here at Israel 365, because it speaks of the day when the temple will be rebuilt in Jerusalem, and then all of the nations will come and stand side by side in prayer before God. It's really astounding. His vision is so broad, it encompasses everyone in the world. He also is a master of balancing harsh judgment with great hope. We find in Isaiah, unlike some of the other prophets, which are almost entirely very negative, Isaiah really can balance the two, right? He could deliver devastating judgment in one chapter and incredible comfort in another chapter, right? And this really is how a loving parent deals with their children. If you think about it, right? The children that we love, right? We can shift back and forth. They're everything to us, our own children. We love them so much. We can have like some moments of incredible, just like a love fest with our kids. We enjoy their company. They're so cute. They're so sweet. And even as they grow older, they're like they're the most important thing that we do in this world. And at the same time, because we love them so much, it's so we can get angry at them and be upset at them and be disappointed in them because we have such high expectations for them. And that really is how God looks at the people of Israel. And that is reflected in the prophecies of Isaiah. Right, where this balance between loving the people desperately with all his heart and at the same time giving them the rebuke that they required in order to live up to the nation that they are meant to be. Now, lastly, Isaiah's prophecies, as we'll talk about as we go through this series, they are relevant not just for his time, but for all time. Right? In Isaiah 11, verse 12, he says, "He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth." Right? This literally describes perfectly the modern return to Zion with remarkable accuracy. Right? He also says in 35:1, "The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom." Anyone who has seen modern Israel's desert agriculture, the way that the amazing people of Israel bring the deserts to life and they make them bloom, can appreciate this prophecy. It's astounding. Thousands of years later, these words are coming true. Now in Isaiah 29, verses 11 and 12, we read, "For you, this whole vision is nothing but words sealed in a scroll. And if you give the scroll to someone who can read and say, 'Read this, please,' they will answer, 'I can't. It is sealed.' Or if you give the scroll to someone who cannot read and say, 'Read this, please,' they will answer, 'I don't know how to read.'" What is Isaiah saying here? Isaiah himself is telling us that many of his prophecies were intentionally sealed for future understanding, that the people of his own time would not understand what he was saying. And I believe that we are living right now in the time when these seals are being opened, when these prophecies that were never understood for thousands of years are now coming to fruition. Now we understand what Isaiah was telling us. Right? He wasn't just speaking to his own generation. He was a prophet for all time and for all generations. So as we study his words in the coming classes, remember that we're not just learning ancient history. We are unlocking messages that may have been waiting specifically for our time, for our generation to be understood.